Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. It is 4 p.m. ET on Tuesday, and we are so happy that you have found us here on Crime Time on A Mighty Blaze. I'm your host, Hank Phillippi Ryan, the USA Today bestselling author of 14 novels of suspense. The newest one, Her Perfect Life, is out right now and an Agatha nominee. Thank you, darling May. And I hope you will all watch for The House Guest coming up in February. Very delighted about that. And yeah, you'll be hearing about it as the time gets closer. But we're so pleased to have you all here today. And I am honored and delighted and thrilled to get to interview the fabulous May Cobb, whose new book, you may know May from The Hunting Wives. I know you do. And her brand new book, My Summer Darlings. I mean, look at that cover, you all. Does that not tell you what the book is about? Is out right now in bookstores everywhere, and it is all the buzz. May, I'm going to let you talk in a minute, but I do want to read you all one thing that the fabulous David Bell said about I was going to say, author of Kill All Your Darlings, said about My Summer Darlings. So this is just darlings everywhere on today's show. Oh, look at all the people who are here. Here's Pamela Fry-Priest and Robert and Judy Morris and Shannon Hansen and Brenda. And Robert is here and Christina and Shanson and Anissa. Your fans have come out in force, May. That is so great. Everybody loves My Summer Darlings and May Cobb. And thank you. Hi, Pamela. And as I was saying, David Bell, who also wrote a book about darlings, says, hey, Judy, says, My Summer Darlings is an intensely suspenseful and deliciously entertaining novel. May Cobb writes as though she's been hanging around your neighborhood, listening to all the conversations and taking notes with a pen as sharp as a fishhook. This book should be required summer poolside reading. You can't go wrong with that. May, what did you think when you read that description of your novel?
The fishhook part just slayed me, and I was just so bowled over. I'm such a huge fan of David's work, and I loved Kill All Your Darlings so much. And his latest, The Finalist, that's coming out this summer, is so delicious. So yeah, I was bowled over by his praise. And
David Bell is a terrific writer, and he really knows what he's talking about. And Darlene is saying fishhook. I know. I was sort of hoping that it wasn't my neighborhood that you were writing about, because this is delicious and manipulative and gaslighty and scary, actually, to think about what might be going on behind closed doors. But I have to tell you all that, and I know May knows this, almost all the accolades about this book, My Summer Darlings, begin with the word sexy, don't they? What did you think when you saw those?
Hank, and before we get to that, I have to hold up the finished edition, because it's even like brighter than the ARC, the color is.
Oh, look at that. Yeah.
Ooh. And I just, shout out to Team Berkeley for always doing these great covers. But let's
go back to the cover, and we'll go back to sexy. We'll always go back to sexy.
Okay.
But what did you tell me about that cover? What does that mean to you, and why is it just so perfect?
It's really just it's so thematically, it's very close to the cover of The Hunting Wives, and that you've got 3 cherries to represent the 3 women, and The Hunting Wives had the great bullets as lipsticks on the cover, and I love sort of just the decadence. It just kind of makes you want to day drink by the pool and make bad decisions.
I love this. It makes you want to day drink by the pool and make bad decisions. And that is sort of throughout this book. But also, the triple entendre really of the stabbed sword through the cherry. I mean, I ask you, that is not very subtle, May.
No, it's not. I thought it was such a stroke of genius. And I didn't realize till I was being interviewed by Mindy Carlson, the great thriller writer for The Big Thrill. And she was like, it's stabbing through the back of the cherry. So it's actually backstabbing. I was like, that's brilliant. I'm stealing that. I know. And Hank, thanks so much for having me. I can't believe we get to hang out again. You're so generous to me. And I'm such a huge fan of yours. And I'm all the feels today for having me back. And Sorry about the time
Oh
change.
no, you're such a treasure. It is wonderful to have you here, and I'm a huge fan of this book. Our pool isn't open yet, but I sat outside in the sun, covered up, of course, reading this because it is such a delicious summer book. And the backstabbing element, that's very nice. Very, very nice. I'm sure there's all kinds of symbolism in this that we aren't going to go into on a family. Are we a family show? On a family but let's fast forward to sexy. So many of the descriptions of this book begin with that word, and it doesn't always mean the same thing to different people. Talk a little bit about that element of your book.
I think for this book, as well as for The Hunting Wives, I was really wanting to do a deep dive into obsession and the way it can derail our lives, and also sort of like unapologetic female desire. Because I loved when I was growing up, and this is going to sound terrible, when I was growing up when I was 8, but I love those like Adrian Lynn erotic thriller films of the 90s, like Basic Instinct, Unfaithful, and what are the others? Fatal Attraction. But I wanted to do something from the female gaze. So, and I didn't want to pump any brakes on where these women might go with their lust and attraction to this dangerous and sexy stranger. So I just sort of let them have as much fun as they possibly could until it was time to start bringing in the crime, until it was crime time.
It's always crime time. Yeah, I love that, May, because one of the things that I think you do so gorgeously in this book, in My Summer Darlings, and we'll talk about the title too, is there are things that women say to each other, and there's things that women say in public, and there are things that women only say to themselves. And you do such a brilliant job of the interior desire and the imagination of these women when it's really unfiltered. How was that to write?
Well, first of all, thank you. That's very high praise coming from you. It was fun, and I think that the character I actually had the most fun with is Cynthia. She's more of the repressed housewife, and she writes in her journal, and that's how we get her point of view, is through her secret journal entries. And I thought, I've always really loved like the diary as a narrative device. And I thought, let's use that for someone who doesn't really have a voice, or who has stifled her voice because she's in this small town and she's wealthy, but that's its own trapping. So she's married sort of into this system, if you will. And she really yearned in college to be a painter and an artist. And even growing up, she was super smart. But her mom sort of pushed her into like etiquette school and the debutante track. And
I mean, we can talk. Like, well, I'd love to talk about the three women in this book in a second, because
yeah,
I think that's another one of the things that's handled so gorgeously, and the structure and the balance between what's expected of you and what you want. And also, in her case, for instance, if you don't really even know what you actually want, if you don't even know, and that's scary as well. Let me take a minute, you all, as we're all gathering here now. Look when I look over here, I'm looking at the comments, and I see so many people here. Anyway, let me remind you that you have found us at A Mighty Blaze. We are at Crime Time, 4:00 every Tuesday at 4 o'clock ET. A Mighty Blaze was started by the fabulous powerhouse team of Jenna Blum and Caroline Levitt at the beginning of the pandemic, which seems way too long ago now, to keep us together, to keep us reading, to keep us being a community, to keep us discovering new authors. And we persevere, and we are still going strong. And today we are welcoming the fabulous, brilliant May Cobb, whose new book, My Summer Darlings, is out now. And as our Margaret behind the scenes, our producer Margaret Bernard, is saying, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more blazing goodness. We are grateful for Margaret too, who's making all this work. So you will meet her someday. We were cooking that up. Anyway, let me read you a quick bio of May Cobb. May Cobb earned her master's in literature from San Francisco State University, and her essays and interviews have appeared in the Washington Post, The Rumpus, Edible Austin, and Austin Monthly. Her previous novel is The Hunting Wives, which you have all read. I know you have. And if you haven't, after this is over, go get that too, as well as My Summer Darlings. A Texas native, she lives in Austin with her family. So let's talk about your book. I mean, I want to talk about friendship and secrets and loyalty and scandal and corruption and obsession and sex with you. So tell us a little bit about this book. You describe it.
I would say the quick pitch is it's three lifelong friends that are living in this small town in East Texas, and they're all approaching 40, and they're each at a different crossroads in their life. One of them is a recent divorcee. One of them, as I mentioned, is more of like the repressed housewife. And then the other one is a socialite who fears her beauty is fading. So in an early scene, we see her gazing out the window at her teenage daughter, and she's jealous of her daughter's figure. And so she's kind of becoming a head case and spiraling. Um, and there's not a lot to do in this town. So they drink wine and they gossip about the other women in the neighborhood. And then when Will Harding, our villain, moves to town, he takes up residence on their block in like this big mansion. And yeah, they're each sort of primed for disaster when he hits town. Um, and it starts with Jen really falling for him, of course, because she's the single one. And the other two, I just don't want to give too much away.
No, but you can see, you can see what's happening here. There are three bored, pushing middle-aged women from different backgrounds, but still in this certain part of the city, which we'll talk about in a minute. They think they're facing another boring East Texas summer, and then the stranger comes to town. And that, of course, is the domino that tips the story into action. Stephanie Roble, who we also love, who wrote Darling Rose Gold, and also the new book, This Could Hurt, which is really pretty amazing. She said, guess what? Sexy, fresh, and fun. My Summer Darlings tells the story of three friends who go after whatever they want, even when what they want is the same man. So that is exactly the setup. It says your novel is unputdownable and devious, a twisty thriller that threw me for loop after loop. And that's another thing that I want to get to too, is that one of the things I always enjoy about your books is that they start out feeling like they're about one thing, this competition among the women for the stranger in town, sort of a crazy Texas housewives kind of thing. And then it turns into something else. It turns into something else as the dominoes fall, much, much darker and much, much more terrifying. As you say, when the crime comes in. Talk a little bit about how your brain works for the Desperate Housewives, meets crime fiction.
Oh, I love that. Thank you, Hank. Yeah, I would say that like with the Hunting Wives, I feel like I almost write like a hybrid women's fiction thriller, because it is pretty heavy with the Desperate Housewives, but I've always loved the darker stories, and I just feel like there's something so unsettling about these tight-knit communities where we really don't know, they have these perfect homes, but if you peer through their well-Windexed windows, there's just a lot more going on. And I knew in the beginning that the villain was going to be a villain, the handsome stranger that moves to town. And I kind of had a notion of what he was really up to, but of course we don't find that out till much later. But yeah, and for some reason, women in peril in the East Texas forest seems to be my bag. So I can't. One day you're going to have to help me get out of the woods and write something in another locale.
Well, no, but I mean, you're from there, right? This is what you know about, and as David Bell was talking about, how it's like you listening in our neighborhoods. This is your milieu. This setting is familiar to you, and that's one of the things that rings so true in this book, is that we feel the heat, and we understand someone who's going to rip up their whole garden and put in something new and different and unique. And this idea of the place of this. I don't want you to leave East Texas. I think your books are fantastic and should stay there. So let's talk about setting. Because if you look at it in a bigger way, there's Texas, then there's East Texas, and then there's Eden Place, where these women live, and then who lives where. Oh my golly, I love that. Is it
It's
a
a
magnet?
sticker. It's one of my book sticker, like part of the pre-order campaign, which I guess is now over because I can't say the pre-order word anymore.
Well, but you know what we can say? We can say the giveaway word. We can say the giveaway word, which you reminded me of, which I forgot. So thank you for bringing up the pre-order word, because we're going to go order it right now. But if you ask a question in the comments, or leave a comment, or just say applause, I love this, or I love the Hunting Wives and can't wait to read My Summer Darlings, whatever you want in the comments, we will spin the wheel of fun. Mark it in the back. We'll spin the wheel of fun when our interview is over, and one of you will win a copy of My Summer Darlings, and we can see if we can get you a welcome to Eden Place little decal
Yes.
as well. That's a
Yeah.
treasure.
Yeah, I'll up the ante. You're never alone in the forest, and then the cherries. So I'll throw those in too.
Oh, look, I win. How did that even happen? Anyway, so let's talk about what is mighty. So Margaret is saying, yes, we love the merch stickers. Gotta love those. So let's talk about, first of all, East Texas. What is that? What's the milieu? What's it like living there?
It was a very interesting place to grow up. As you mentioned, I'm in Austin now, which is about 5 hours away because Texas is so big that it takes, a day to drive across the state. And East Texas, where I grew up and where the novel sets, is the little town of Longview. Was like 50,000 people when I grew up. Now it's like 100,000, and they have an Olive Garden, and it's just gotten big. And it's really close to Louisiana, so it's like 30 miles from the Louisiana border. So it's what you would picture when you think of like that show True Blood. So it's got like some Spanish moss, and it's this lush, deep pine forest, and it's not really what people think of when they think of Texas. But growing up there, I was always fascinated by the forest and the trees. And then I guess because I'm a product of the 80s and I watched like Watcher in the Woods and Children of the Corn, then the forest also seemed creepy to me. So it seemed like a perfect noir backdrop. And also I get homesick. And so it's a nice way to visit Longview, in my writing and kind of pay homage to it.
Don't say Children of the Corn, because that scares me every time. That is the scariest thing. I don't even talk about that. It's so incredibly scary. And I was a grown-up when I saw that. So hey, or read that. And I mean, it's so sultry. The atmosphere in this book is just incredibly sultry, as are the people. But then this little area of Eden Place, which I'm sure was just randomly chosen name, May.
It's funny. There is a little place called Eden Place, but it's close to the neighborhood I described, but I sort of just stole the name. But yeah, so the other thing about East Texas that's interesting is that there was this big oil boom in the 1920s. And so there's this crazy amount of wealth there still from the oil families. And you do have these really opulent oil mansions, and then also new builds, and it's just kind of insane and unexpected for such a small community in Texas to have that. But it's almost like, the Highland Park neighborhood of Dallas or something, where you have these socialites and they have, balls, but it's like they get bored because the pond is small and they're big fish. And so that's where the misbehaving comes in.
And all that is so in the undercurrent of this book. I especially love how on Eden Place, Eden, first of all, which was about lust and deception and female manipulation and the fall of man, if you want to think of it that way, which I know you do, for this. Even where you live on Eden Place makes a difference in this book.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's very true, because Jen, the main character, I'm just going to call her the main character because she pretty much is. She lives in more of a middle to upper middle class home, whereas her friends, Kitty and Cynthia, live in much posher environs. And it is sort of this mix of like, one block over, you have more like the 1980s ranch style homes. And then you go to the next block and it's, mansions basically. So, and that's, just dipping ahead real quick into the friendship water
Well, let's just say you have the three women, Cynthia, Kitty, and Jen, and they're friends-ish kind of.
Yeah.
And they each have their own desire, and they each have their own passion, and they each have their own goals. Talk a little bit about female friendship. I mean, this is just such, and then we'll talk about mothers and daughters, but female friendship is plays such a big role in this book.
Yeah, I think I really love examining that dynamic because it's not like male friendships, which seem a little simpler and old-fashioned. And some female friendships, the toxic, twisty ones, are just endlessly fascinating to me. The level of manipulation in games, but then also love for each other that's like fierce loyalty. It just gets very jumbled up. And growing up, I also loved that movie Heathers, and it was just the mean girls. And while I don't think these girls are as mean as the hunting wives, they definitely backstab and they put themselves and their desires above their friends. So I wanted to sort of ask the question, like, why would these women risk their friendship with each other for this man? And the answer, I guess, hopefully, is that he was that irresistible. And there's a bunch of other different answers too, but I wanted to kind of raise that question.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting how there's this sort of tightish knit group of women who, as long as everything stays in stasis and as long as nothing really changes, their relationships don't change, and they can, gossip about the other women, about, the woman who bends over on purpose with her cleavage and the short skirts and the show off the earrings and all those kinds of, who brings what to the picnic, that sort of level of snipey, gossipy stuff that probably doesn't hurt. And how even in the kids realm, there's always the alpha, whether it's the alpha girl or the alpha boy. I mean, that sort of social hierarchy is so inherent in this book.
Thank you. Yeah, I really tried to go there because it is a source of endless fascination for me.
But there's this thing that I read somewhere, that there are only two plots. Someone goes on a journey, or a stranger comes to town, right? And this is clearly, which are the same if you change the point of view, but this is clearly a stranger comes to town. And that stranger is the pebble in the pond that starts the ripples, of this book going, ripples that get out of control.
I love that, Hank. Yes, they do. They really do. And I just wanted to kind of gather these women. So I put a few like writerly boundaries on myself, where it had to all take place within the neighborhood. I didn't want them to be out in the town, or I wanted it to feel claustrophobic. And then I wanted it to take place over summer. And then I wanted to have these ladies, like, I wanted to light the fuse on the powder keg and see what would happen and see how they would behave under these circumstances, because I don't do a lot of plotting or outlining. And I saw a question asking if I do or not, and I don't. And so I try to let the characters lead me as much as possible, because that's the fun part of writing for me, is I just like to see, where it's all going. And wow, they did surprise me with how some of their decisions.
Well, just like life, that's how I write too, May, is that I have an idea and then I just
I love that about you. Always cancer.
We can talk together about our next books. But so the idea started with the three women and the man who comes to town. Is that what you knew?
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty much all I knew. And
Also not the end.
I didn't know the end. I knew he was up to something worse. So I always write like a one-page synopsis for myself to try to have something to, like, an anchor for when, I get to the page 50 and I'm like, oh, this is terrible. Then or I get off course. Like, no, this is what you wanted to write about. And maybe I don't know the whole thing, but like I usually get like that concept or that gut thing down. So I'll refer back to that. So I wasn't really sure what he was up to.
Oh, I love that. And he may not have been as well, but one of the things that is also so much fun, and let me see if I can find this. I think I turned down the page. Don't yell at me about that. When there is so much of this book, you all, that is double entendre if you read it that way. and perfectly above board if you don't. And this is the moment that one of the characters meets Jen. Will is new in town. He comes over because he sees a girl's car. And he invites her over. He says, "You should come by as well, Jen." Will pivoted his gaze back to me. "As early as this afternoon, if you like." His eyes were grinning at me again. "Really?" My voice came out squeaky and high. "Sure, why not? I'm in the midst of unpacking and could use a hand." As if reading the confusion on my face, he snorted out a quick laugh. "I didn't mean you'd be lifting things and digging me out of boxes." His eyes were level with mine. "But I bet you could tell me where to put things." I just burst out. Now, am I wrong? Am I just terrible and I'm reading double? Okay.
No, you're spot on, Hank. And I'm like blushing over here that I wrote that stuff.
but perfectly, but it's perfectly above board if you read it another way. I mean, his name, forgive me, you all. Mighty Blaze is saying salacious. Darlene says this interview is completely convinced to go purchase the novel. Our very goal, Darlene. Absolutely so. I mean, his name, and forgive me, is Will Harding, which out of all the names you could have chosen.
Yeah. Yes.
So we'll just go with that. Let's talk about, you were talking about writing and the strictures that you gave yourself about making it be this small town, this small area of town. You also have a really intriguing and perfectly done structure. And you alluded to this a little bit earlier. Talk a little bit about that structure and why you decided to do that.
Thank you, Hank. And I have to thank you again for your book trib piece about that. I love it. Yeah, so I wanted The Hunting Wives was from one point of view, and I thought, I would like to challenge myself to try to do multiple perspectives. So I gave each of the three women, 3 points of views. And I also wanted to, because I knew it would, almost, it's like Desperate Housewives and it's soapy. And I knew it needed to have that suspense element. So it opens with a woman who thinks she's dying in the forest. And that's the present day thread. And that pops up about, I don't know, every 6th or 7th chapter where you get to hear more from, and you're wondering, like, who is this person? Which of the women is this? And then I cut back to 6 weeks before when Will is first arriving in town. And then it unfolds through their, 3 points of views. And I really wanted to do the 3 because I knew, the reader could be let in on the secrets that they're keeping from one another. And then, Cynthia's, of course, as I mentioned, is told through her secret journal that she's hiding in her lingerie drawer from her husband because he doesn't even know she has lingerie because he's so, what's the word, out of touch with her desires.
Yeah, I mean, it's sad. I mean, I want to go back to that in a second, but writing the diary. I mean, I loved what you said earlier about that she's so stifled that she has to write it in this diary. She doesn't even know what she wants, and maybe in the diary and in therapy, this is going to come out, her journey to find herself. What was it like to go that deeply into a character's psyche?
I really enjoyed it. I really did, because for me, it was interesting to see what all she did have bottled up and to see there were like maybe 3 points in her life where she would have chosen a different path and she got a different message from someone. First, it was from her mom, and then it was from Kitty, and then later her husband. There's one line that, and I don't find myself humorous, but this cracks me up when I read it. She's remembering, like, she longs to go to Europe. She's never left the country. And she's telling the reader, like in her diary, she said, I asked Gerald after college if we could go backpacking. And he said, what, like hippies? And totally shut her down and scoffed at her. So, yeah.
But then what you do that's also so great is that after he has dismissed that, oops, I just threw my pencil. After he dismisses that, she realizes she's thinking about it again, and her husband is not in the fantasy anymore. And
Yeah.
that seems like a big turning point for her.
Yes. Yes. And that comes through her journaling. So that's one thing she really does. So Will does give her a sense of awakening, but she's already awakening herself through this diary writing, if you will. Um,
And
yeah.
it's wonderful and evocative. I want to just take this second to remind you all, Mighty Blaze, Margaret is saying shades of persuasion, very cool structural choice. And it is a very cool structural choice in My Summer Darlings, because it does take you deeply into the head of this character in particular, and really evocative of how we all think. We all have hopes and fears and desires. And one of the things I want to talk about a little bit is that I know this is slinky and seductive and, double entendre, even not so much, and about Desperate Housewives, but it was so touching to me, this book. I mean, I know there's a crime. I know it's awful. I know it's scary and tense and page turning, and women power and all that. But it's also very touching because there's just such a feeling of, hitting a certain age, these women, and they're thinking, is this all? Am I ever going to be happy? What is happiness? Where do I go? What do I do? Did I make the wrong decisions? I have this one life. Did I blow it? Is that part of what you were trying to? No, Hank, you just made that up. Is that what you were sort of alluding to a little as well?
Absolutely. I'm so glad you picked up on that. For sure. Yes. I really did want to explore that sort of feeling of desperate restlessness where you,
Mhm.
like you said, is this as good as it gets? Is this all there is? They're each staring down, also being empty nesters in a few years. So their whole identities have been wrapped up in, raising their kids, and now their kids are sort of turning on them because they're teens, and, being with their spouses. And yeah, I think for each of them, they're starting to fill the great void. And what are they going to do? And they don't live in Dallas, so they can't just go spend their money at Neiman Marcus and, get happy that way.
Yeah.
There's really, it's a one horse town. It's a one Olive Garden town.
A one Olive Garden town. I know. Whenever I think about the Olive Garden now, I think about the book The Maid by Nita Prose. The
Yes,
Olive Garden
yes.
plays
That's
a
so
big role in that. We all have to go. We all have to go to the Olive Garden.
That's so
And
funny you say that, because I actually wrote her and I was like, "Oh my god, you nailed it with the Olive Garden detail." Like, that's and it made me hungry for it. I was like, "I need to get to the Olive Garden."
I know. I think we all have to go when COVID is over. We'll all go to the Olive Garden, have the tour of Italy, and celebrate your wonderful book. We're getting down to the questions, so get your questions together, you all. Don't forget, if you ask a question or leave a comment, you'll be entered to win a copy of My Summer Darlings by the fabulous May Cobb. You'll get the real one. I have the advanced reader copy, but you'll get hold that up again. Look at that. Perfect summer colors. So don't forget to leave a comment or ask a question for May, and we'll get to those in one second. Did you always all readers will be eating at Olive Garden now, Anissa. Did you always want to be a writer?
I don't think consciously I did, but I knew at about age 23 that was my path, because I stumbled across this jazz musician who I became obsessed with him and his story, and I'm still writing this nonfiction book, but I had to tell a story. And so that's what set me down the path. And I did scribble in a bunch of diaries when I was little. So looking back, I'm like, yeah, you wanted to be a writer, but I never was like, oh, I'm a writer. And it's still, even now, sometimes I'm like, I have a hard time saying when people ask what I do, I'm a writer. It's like,
Oh, come on. I understand that so perfectly. I have to tell you that I struggle with the same thing, but the Hunting Wives just hit it out of the ballpark. You were the talk of more than the talk of the town, the talk of the country, talk of the world. My Summer Darling is getting the same kind of fabulous response because, May, you have this way of luring people into your novels by really writing revealingly, not only about really wonderful stories, but the outer stories, the plot is fantastic, but the inner stories, the way people's minds work, the psychology, fidelity, loyalty, marriage, women power, and how when family is threatened, how people can bond together, even if they didn't think they had it in them. And it is a marvelous book, My Summer Darlings. Over the course of a summer in one little part of one little town in East Texas. Let's take some questions. Can you stay for a couple minutes more to answer some questions?
Oh, for sure. Yes, absolutely.
Who has a question? How did you pick the name? My Summer Darlings, you mean, Sherry? How did you pick the title? Talk about that.
Yeah, it honestly just came to me out of the ether, and I just and it just stuck. And my editor at the time was like, I don't know, and I understood some of her reasons, but I was like, I just really fought for it. I was like, I don't know why, but it's the title. I can't explain it, but um, I I think she might have been a little concerned that it didn't say thriller enough,
I
but
think it does. I
yeah,
think it's
yeah,
I mean, it's from his point of view.
yeah.
They're the three.
Hmm.
And so the idea that he sort of we go into the book thinking he has the power
Yeah.
in the summer and they're adorable. And it's this moment, this one critical moment in time that three people share, but there's a person who's you should next time call me. I'll go in there and fight for your time. You love it, right?
I do. I do. It always, how it is when you have a title that clicks and you just know that it's the one. So I'm really happy that the team came around to it and embraced it. And then, like we said again with the cover and the sword through the cherry, that it does tell you that it's like not all as well, within these pages.
Pretty much so. Pretty much so. I think we had another question that we popped up. Darlene is saying, such a great question. Are any of the characters based on your friends? You can tell us. We won't tell anyone.
I will tell you, and then I'll go into witness protection.
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't say specifically my friends, but I would definitely say they're based on a type of woman in East Texas that I grew up around. So, like Darlene, if you got on a plane and you went there was this tiny airport, and you went to a bar, like you would recognize these women. They're fun, they're loud, they're rowdy, they're sassy, and they're just kind of everywhere up there. So it really wasn't. It was like writing nonfiction in a lot of ways. Yeah.
And you can also look at them through the eyes of you as a writer to try to deconstruct what's underneath the hair and what's underneath the eyelashes and what's underneath the low cut blouses and too short shorts. That those little details are throughout that paint such a wonderful picture of who these women are on the outside.
Thank you.
And also who they are on the inside. Sherry is asking, how was writing this book? And there's so many levels of this great question. How was writing this book different than writing The Hunting Wives?
That is such a great question. I would say because I had the 3 points of view, I would say it was different because I wasn't just in one person's head the whole time and having to make that interesting, which is its own feat, because it's like I get sick of her by page 300 and don't want to hear her voice anymore. So this felt, I don't want to say fresher, but it did. I could take, when I would get sick of one, take a break and go write the other person, which was nice. So I think that's the biggest difference. And then I also, with this one, I really tried to write my characters to where they would be a little bit more grounded than Hunting Wives. They're not as wealthy. They're not as like detached and villainous. They're a little bit more like, regular people, I hope. So I tried to make it less like, the Jaws music and more something that people could recognize.
And you did a great job with that. The women are all incredibly relatable. I mean, you really feel like you could really talk to them. But the other question I wonder if it's, and Sherry, let me hang on for you 1 second. The other part of that question though is, The Hunting Wives, your first novel that got this kind of acclaim. Now you have to sort of do it again. People know, like, wow, we loved Hunting Wives. Now what is she going to do now? And so was there pressure to make it be as good or better?
It's interesting. Thank goodness when my agent sold the Hunting Wives, we got a two-book deal. So and this was in 2019. So long story short, I turned in the Hunting Wives that summer. Um, and and I work with a freelance editor, and I said, "Oh, I finished. I'm going to take a month off, and I'm going to go like to the mall, and I'm just going to chill out." And she was like, "You can have a week off, and then you're
Oh,
starting." And I was like, "Okay, whatever." But I did. She made me, and I'm so glad because then the world shut down, and thank God I had three-fourths of it written, because it would have been monumentally hard to finish. So I forget what the question was. I'm on a
well,
ramble.
make it. No, I love that. Just was it more difficult to have your second? I mean, sometimes
No,
second novels can
yeah.
be super hard.
So I was it was a blessing that the Hunting Wives wasn't out yet, and it we had a long launch for that. So I didn't have that pressure from readers because I had this completely in the can by the time the Hunting
Oh,
Wives, we were almost to copy edits by the time the Hunting Wives came out. But I did have internalized pressure of, wow, I'm not just writing this in a corner of my bedroom for myself with the hopes I can sell it. Like now I've got to do this dance for the publishers and hope they like it. And, so it was hard. That was hard for me. So I'll take any tips you have, Hank, about.
no, I got nothing, sister. I got nothing. I'm terrified every day. There's no question about it. You all know that. I'm looking at the comments when I look over here. I'm terrified every day, and I kind of think that's part of the deal. I think when we think, oh, I've got this, not a problem, that's when we've really lost it. Because I do think that writers, um, we, I know I do, and I bet you do. You're trying to be better every time, a cooler story, a better story, a more intriguing story. You picked multiple points of view. You were raising the bar on yourself. Let's see if I can do this. And you have done it so gorgeously in My Summer Darlings. And Liz is saying both the cover and the title are tempting, and that is a great. And Robert's saying a summer must read for me, Summer Darlings. And Sherry's saying glad you stuck with it, and we're glad you stuck with it too. Yay! One more question. Is there time for one more question? If we have one. Ooh, what did you do special to celebrate your launch day or today?
I actually went and got my hair straightened and trimmed.
Nice.
And then I went and bought chocolates, which I'm going to bring to the booksellers tonight at Book People in Austin, where I get to have an in-person event, and I can't believe it. And then tonight is the in-person event, and then I'm going to have a small outdoor at a bar little gathering with my mom and sister and husband and some close friends to celebrate. So,
And if you go to your website, if you all go to May's website, there's a list of other events that she's having online and in person. Please do not miss those if you want to hear more than we can talk about in this 40 minutes. So you have, but isn't that amazing, May, that how much we now are grateful for the idea that we can go to a real bookstore with real people and really celebrate carefully, carefully, carefully.
carefully, very carefully. Yes, Hank, but this is lovely too because I'm hanging out with all of y'all and we're all scattered out everywhere. So thank you. But yes, I will be. It's been since 2018 and I'm ready to see some faces, hopefully masked. Um, I'm just getting over COVID, so I'm a little immune for a minute, but gosh, yeah, I'm ready to go out there safely and see some people I haven't seen since before the pandemic.
Well, getting over COVID is fabulous. Getting over COVID and having a wonderful blockbuster new book is doubly fabulous. And we are so honored that you are here with us today, May. Shall we spin the wheel of fun? And oops, there we go, and see who wins a copy of May. You've never seen this, but watch this that Margaret's going to do.
Ooh, I love it.
I think next time we'll try to get music. We need music.
Okay.
And the winner is of My Summer Darlings is Katie Mirsky, an author herself. And that is wonderful.
Awesome.
She writes terrific novels, and I know that she will love this as well. So we will, Katie, you email me. I think you have my email, and we will get you a copy of My Summer Darlings and the super super loot that the fabulous May has offered. Before you go, May, stand by for 2 seconds because I just want to tell you all about next week's. We are double booked next week, you all. Crime Time is the only time when it's good to be double booked. Next week at 3 o'clock, look at this. At 3 o'clock, we have Sarah Paretsky. Sarah Paretsky is the queen of the detective story. Her novel stars V.I. Warshawski, one of the most classic detectives ever written, ever. And I've got to tell you, May, neither you nor I would be here without Sarah Paretsky. So we honor her amazingly. And we'll talk about her current novel. I think it's her 21st, V.I. Warshawski, Overboard. I know. And then at 4 o'clock, we will meet Scott Shepard, whose second novel, Should I Fall With Me? This is his third, I think, stars Austin Grant. Scotland Yard Inspector Austin Grant is his wonderful traditional detective story set in New York and London. And you can see how good it looks. And it is marvelous. And Scott is beyond interesting, you guys. Come next Tuesday and hear all the stories.
Great. Scott is great. Sorry to interrupt, but he's fabulous. And I love his cover too.
Yeah. Isn't he fabulous? And his life is just incredible.
Yes.
He was telling the story about once he went to a baseball game and he said to his father was a big Hollywood mogul. And he said to his father, I love baseball games. They always come and take your picture. And his father said, that's because we're sitting with Frank Sinatra. So that is a good story. So we will have Sarah Paretsky, a star, Scott Shepard, a star, both next week here on Crime Time at Tuesday at 3 p.m. and 4 p.m. ET. And today we have had the absolute joy of talking with May Cobb and her brand new book, My Summer Darlings. May, my darling, congratulations on this.
Thank you so much, Hank, for having me. What a joy it is to see your face and get to talk to you again. I adore you.
Thank you. You too. And next time in person with chocolate and wine.
Yes, absolutely.
We're making a deal. We're making a deal. And until next week, you all, I am so pleased that you were all here with us today. Thank you, thank you, thank you for coming. And remember, as I always say, it is always safe inside a book. And we will see you next week.